All right, welcome back. It's still East Central, and we're still here giving you the biggest entertainment stories from around the world. Yes, we brought you the news already, and now I want to talk about something that is hot on our Hot Topic conversation today. As Sean Diddy Combs' high-profile sex trafficking trial nears its conclusion, all eyes are on the courtroom with closing arguments set to begin. After 7 weeks of intense testimony from 34 prosecution witnesses, Combs' legal team opted for a swift defense, just 30 minutes, no witnesses, and a push for full acquittal, citing insufficient evidence. With the racketeering charge now narrowed and political distractions taken off the table, a verdict is expected before July 4th. Joining us now to break it all down is Afua Hagan, our international correspondent, who's been closely following the case. Hi, Afua. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm great. I was going to say let's jump on Diddy conversation, but you always say, no, we're not jumping on Diddy conversation. We're having the conversation.
I'm telling you, I'm not jumping on P. Diddy.
Okay.
Not right now.
Okay. All right. So it's been, a set of weeks, interesting weeks. The case has been, we've been revealing different things and shocking discoveries as well. But how did Sean Diddy Combs' choice not to testify affect the defense overall strategy? Because usually people would expect that he should have something to say, but he decided not to speak. What do you have to say about this?
Yeah, and I think actually we were all sort of on tenterhooks waiting for this cross-examination. This is a classic tactic of the defense. It means that P. Diddy won't crumble under a potentially damaging cross-examination. He can't trip himself up. He can't tell any lies in court because he's not being put on the stand. A classic defense tactic, like I said. They relied on the evidence that they had, which was consensual text threads, and arguing that the prosecution failed to reach its burden, failed to do what it wanted to do, which was bring adequate evidence of a prosecution. They presumed the innocence of P. Diddy, and all he came to the stand to say, like you so rightly said in your introduction, was to congratulate the judge, Judge Aaron Subramanian, and say, he did a great job, and that was it. Like I say, it's a classic defense tactic. P. Diddy, under no pressure, under no damaging cross-examination, stands up on the stands, thanks the judge, job done. 30 minutes in and out.
Wow, what would you call that? That's a smart move right there, because, okay, well, what does we heard that they dropped a couple of charges. They're talking about the attempted kidnapping, arson, and aid to sex trafficking charges. What's this about? What do you think could this really affect the conspiracy case here?
Yeah, you're absolutely right in saying that they dropped some of the charges. They removed some of them. So they dropped kidnapping, arson, and aiding sex trafficking charges. So legally, that's about narrowing the scope, right? So prosecutors now face the most substantial allegations. That's sex trafficking, that's forced prosecutions. For the defense, it removes the complexity of the case, and it tends to frame the case more favorably because there's less charges leveled against the defendant. For the prosecution, it puts the spotlight on the more serious charges and streamlines their case also. So this, I think, for the prosecution is about making sure that they can secure a conviction for the most serious crimes.
Interesting. And so far, throughout the course of this trial, we've had like 34 people, go on the stand to talk about, to witness. And throughout this 34, which would you say has been the most compelling and maybe revealing testimony you've heard throughout this trial, if you should look back?
I think there's three key pieces of evidence for me, or people on the stand. First of all, Cassie Ventura, right, up on the stand, heavily pregnant, talking about all these things that happened to her. Very, very emotional testimony there, talking about the freak-offs and all the other things that happened. And of course, along with that, you had the piece of evidence, which was that video footage from 2016 that was obtained by CNN. And that video footage was of P. Diddy brutally beating Cassie in that hotel. That was, extremely compelling from the minute we saw that video. Very, very disturbing. And then Jane, it's one of the last testimonies, a Jane Doe who came forward and corroborated the accounts that Cassie had given about the recent incidents, about incidents in August 2023. I think for me, those three key things were the most compelling pieces of evidence that we saw throughout this case. But, there was lots of other people that took to the stand. Cassie's mother was one of them as well. But for me, those three things were very, very key and very important.
Interesting. And looking at these people that took the stand, how would you say the judge handled the trial to maintain balance and fairness? Because that's a very key decision to look out for, given the fact that everybody has, Yeah, go ahead.
It was imperative that the judge had to keep this trial fair because there's been so much scrutiny. You've got, a hip-hop music superstar on the stand, and everybody wants to get this right? So it had to be fair, and it had to be focused. And he, admonished the counsel after a juror privacy breach. He warned of contempt for leaks. He ensured that the jury instructions were clear, and he cautioned Sean Diddy Combs about his courtroom behavior. His interventions made sure that the trial was as balanced as it could be. And that was so supremely important because if you are going to get a conviction in a case such as this, someone who is so famous, so well known for such serious charges, it has to be watertight and airtight. And I think he did a good job of making sure that it was that.
Interesting. Now let's talk about the media and public opinion. What effect do you think it has had in this case so far? Because we've seen different posts on social media, people talking about it, people analyzing it. Do you think this has affected or will affect the outcome of this case moving forward?
Let's talk about the court of public opinion, right, and what's being said on social media. There's so many opinions that have been flying around about this. People saying about Cassie particularly, well, why didn't she leave? And then other people saying about P. Diddy, why was this allowed to go on for so long? I don't think that will sway the judge or the jury, and it certainly shouldn't. But when it comes to the media, you've had so many broadcasters, newspapers, websites, covering this trial. I mean, we've been talking about it for weeks, like you so rightly said in your introduction. People are so interested in this case because you have this hip-hop superstar, like I said, someone that's been on the radar for years and years, and other famous people getting involved as well. And so there's been so much focus on this. So much has been written, so much has been said about it, and that really has shaped the discourse when we're talking about this particular trial. It really reminds me of O.J. Simpson, way before you were born, but the case of O.J. Simpson and how people talked about it then, R. Kelly and how people talked about that case as well. This is very, very similar and definitely has formed and shaped the public opinion, but it shouldn't shape the opinion of the judge and the jury.
Okay, so Afua, before I let you go, let's just talk about this. If Sean Diddy Combs is found guilty and convicted, how likely is it that he would receive the life sentence, considering the charges and the evidence presented? How likely? Because, if everything goes the way it's supposed to be, he's supposed to be convicted for life. But how likely, looking at the evidences and things like that now?
Such a good question. I'm not an expert, so I'm just going to tell you what I think I know. So he faces a mandatory minimum of 15 years. and he could face a sentence of life in prison for the racketeering and sex trafficking charges.
Yes.
But those life sentences come in the rare exceptions. So we shouldn't expect a life sentence. Factors like his age, his previous conduct will be taken into consideration, and the specifics of the harm caused, right? So if we are looking at the most serious charges for the sex trafficking and the racketeering, we could see 20 to 30 years in prison for that. We could see a minimum of 15, a maximum of 30. Whether we'll see a life sentence, I don't think we will, partly because of his age, right? He's 55 years old. But you might have a case where the judge wants to make an exception, where he wants to make an example, where he wants to say, it doesn't matter how famous you are, you just cannot get away with stuff like this. So I really don't know what we could expect. A minimum of 15 years, a maximum of 30, but I think a life sentence could be an exception unless the judge wants to make an example of P. Diddy.
All right. Thank you very much, Afua, for helping us break down this conversation and shedding more light in it, as we will definitely bring the updates when the verdict is being passed. I'm sure we'll be back here again to talk about it as well. Thank you for joining us, Afua, on the show today.